BC ferries are a critical part of the province's transportation system. They're really our marine highway system. Every day, people use BC ferries to get to work, to visit family and friends. We all depend on predictable and affordable service. With the global economic slowdown, some say that now may be the time to save money by making cuts, reducing services, or even privatizing our ferry service. That would be a mistake. Such an approach would leave vulnerable the many people, communities, and businesses that are dependent on BC ferries. But costs are a concern. With global inflation and supply chain cost pressures, recent submissions to the BC Ferries Commissioner made it clear that users could face unacceptable fare hikes if we didn't step in. We're talking about a potential fare increase of more than 10% in each of the next 4 years. It would simply put too much pressure on families and small businesses who rely on BC ferries. 10% hikes for 4 more years. 10% hikes for 4 years would mean that people would, of course, be paying more to ride the ferry. But we would also see other prices rise as a result. The impacts to deliveries, for example, would increase costs for businesses, professional contractors, and tradespeople. They would in turn pass these costs on to consumers and families already hit hard by rising prices. All this would take away from the money that could be going towards things like groceries or the basics for families, for students, for seniors already under strain. That's why we're putting this year's surplus to work for people. Today, we are providing $500 million in new funding for BC Ferries. This funding serves a few purposes. Most importantly, it will help keep fares stable so people can continue to use the ferry service they rely on. We know the increase in core ferry costs like fuel, along with global inflation, are driving up overall costs for BC ferries. So the funding will also support the electrification of BC ferries and other initiatives to green the fleet, which in the long term will help control costs as well. Our government's goal is to keep the annual average fare increase at the level it has been in recent years, below 3%. The final fare will, of course, be determined by the BC Ferries Commissioner. Thousands of British Columbians take the ferry every day. This investment will help them get where they need to go with predictable fares. It will help small businesses get their products to customers without a spike in delivery charges. Today's action is the latest in a series of measures our government has taken to support British Columbians with their day-to-day costs. Yesterday, we announced another BC affordability credit, which middle and low-income British Columbian families will see in their bank accounts in April. For a family with 2 kids, it's as much as $410 in support. We know this alone will not cover all the expenses, but every bit helps when it comes to giving families a bit more confidence at the end of the month. Since last fall, we've taken several steps to ease the pressure on people's budgets, a BC Hydro rebate, saving parents hundreds of dollars or more every month on childcare, ICBC rebates, enhanced BC family benefits for the first 3 months of this year. We've also frozen ICBC rates for the next 2 years, and capped rent increases to 2%, which is below the inflation rate. Worldwide, these are uncertain times. A global pandemic and global inflation have hit us hard here at home. Yet I am optimistic about our future here in British Columbia. We're taking bold steps today to make tomorrow more secure for everyone. Keeping fares stable at BC Ferries will allow people to stay connected through a safe and efficient ferry system with predictable costs. This is good news for the people and communities who rely on BC Ferries and for the whole province, as small businesses and all of us depend on strong supply chains for goods and services. By working together, we're building the better British Columbia that we all want. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much, Premier Eby, for making this incredibly important announcement today. I'm grateful to join you from the territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people and the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations here on Vancouver Islands, the Southern Island. I'd like to add to what Premier Eby just said about the importance of our coastal ferry service to the people of BC. 3/4 of British Columbians live along BC's coast. For a lot of us, BC Ferries is our connection to the rest of the province, for work and for business, for buying goods, and for getting to medical appointments. Last year, more than 21 million passengers traveled on BC Ferries. It's also vitally important for the movement of goods on and off our islands. BC Ferries last year carried more than 9 million vehicles on its routes up and down our coast. This is why over the last few years, we've taken important action to improve service and keep fares affordable. In the spring of 2019, the province added 2,700 round trips. We reduced fares by 15% on smaller and northern routes. We froze fares on the major routes, and we brought back free passenger travel for seniors traveling Monday to Thursday. In 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, our government worked to secure $308 million in safe restart funding and provided that to BC Ferries to cover COVID-related operational losses, to protect services, and again, to limit fare increases. And as evidenced by Premier Eby's announcement today, our government continues to prioritize a reliable and affordable ferry system. Some of us who live in larger coastal communities may take the ferry just once a month or a few times a year. For others, they live in ferry-dependent communities, and the service is a daily essential to get to work, to get to school, or important medical appointments. Regardless of where we live and how often we take the ferry, one thing that we can all agree upon and that binds us as British Columbians is that we need a reliable and affordable ferry system. By protecting the affordability of fares and supporting electrification of BC Ferries, we will lower the company's fuel costs over time, reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the province. And that's what we're doing, so that coastal communities and all British Columbians are well served and supported by BC Ferries and our coastal ferry service. And I want to thank Premier Eby again for making what is a critically important announcement in the face of historic high 40-year inflation rates that are occurring globally, protecting the interests of ferry-dependent communities and all ferry users in British Columbia, and protecting affordability and shielding it from the price of goods going up for all islanders on construction materials, on food and groceries, and everything that is part of our economy is so vitally important. I'd like to thank the Premier again, and I'd like to welcome Diana Mumford. Diana is a resident of Sechelt. She has been a very important advocate for ferry users in her home community and all of those living on the Sunshine Coast, and in her role as the Ferry Advisory Committee Chair, indeed all ferry communities on our coast. Diana will say a few words about what today's announcement means for ferry users.
Thank you. Thank you. I am honored today to be representing the 13 volunteer ferry advisory committees that are the voice of residents for all communities on BC's coast, which extends from the Haida Gwaii to the southern Gulf Islands. As ferry advisory committees, we advise and advocate to BC Ferries for affordable and reliable ferry service so that we can travel to work, medical appointments, or visit family. Our coastal communities depend on ferries for their economic well-being as they transport essential goods and services for residents and businesses, as well as bringing in visitors and tourists. The BC coast plays a vital role in the economic prosperity for our province, so I am very grateful that Honourable Premier Eby and Honourable Minister Fleming are making this exciting and very positive funding announcement today with such a large injection of money into ensuring ferry fares remain affordable while also helping the ferry system renew terminals and ferries. I raised my family of 4 children in the Lower Mainland, and ferries were not an important factor in my daily life. That is, until I moved to the Sunshine Coast. Now my children are grown and have families of their own and have moved to new communities in BC. 3 of them have chosen to move to Vancouver Island. So now lots of ferry travel is part of my life to be able to spend time with my kids and my grandkids. My frequent travel on ferries, as well as the opportunity to meet and work with other Ferry Advisory Committee chairs as the group's chair, has taught me how essential an affordable and reliable ferry service is to the well-being of our communities and the businesses that provide our products and services. It is also more than just the economics of a fare cost, but the social and mental well-being of people who depend on ferries to spend quality time with family and friends. Ferries keep all of us connected throughout BC, and the acknowledgement and commitment by the BC government to provide the affordability for all of us is so much appreciated. A very heartfelt thank you, Premier Eby, and Minister Fleming from all ferry users. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Diana. I'll turn it over to Tim, who will run our mic for the media.
Great, thank you. Happy Sunday. For those on the line, press *1 to get into the queue if you have a question. We'll do one question and one follow-up. Our first question goes to Richard Zussman, Global News.
Premier, what other considerations were being given here in terms of finding this money? Was there any thought given to potentially increasing rates for people visiting from outside of British Columbia? And for Minister Fleming, is there any hope that the buffet will be opening at some point soon on the ferries?
I want to weigh on the buffet question too. I'm really excited about the new leadership at BC Ferries. Joy McPhail as chair of the board, and we have the former CEO of ICBC, who turned our provincial car insurance corporation around from losing more than $1 billion a year to providing rebates and some of the lowest costs and best benefits across Canada available. Who has agreed, Nicholas Jimenez, who has agreed to take over as CEO at BC Ferries. My hope is that they will find ways to ensure that our ferry system remains efficient and effective in delivering people and goods across the province, because that's what we depend on as British Columbians. And as part of that, would of course welcome the buffets to reopen. I'll pass it over to Minister Fleming.
So much, Premier, and I think that buffet question, Richard, is best directed at Joy McPhail, who of course chairs the Independent Ferry Corporation on those sorts of operational decisions, but I will join you in voicing my support for it. I want to address your other question. The Premier has talked about how important this is overall for coastal communities and what that means for British Columbia. I think the idea of having a differential out of province or international fare is not one that is feasible or desirable. First of all, a lot of tourists who would be traveling to the island or back to the mainland would be on main run ferries, which actually make money and cross-subsidize smaller northern routes within the corporation. But secondly, it would be, in my view, highly impractical, and also the tourism economy is so incredibly important. Having visitors here, both domestic Canadian visitors and international visitors, spending money and enjoying the spectacular coast of our great province is exactly the kind of thing that we want to encourage. So I think a differential price on BC Ferries for out of province visitors would be wrong, just as it would be wrong to charge them more, for example, when they use the SkyTrain in the Lower Mainland.
Great, thanks. Richard, do you have a follow-up?
I do. For the Premier, unrelated, there are a series of ads running now on the radio about what you've done in your first 100 days. They are paid for by caucus, which is by extension taxpayer dollars. This is the sort of issue that you were leading on when the previous government did this. Why not pay for these through money raised by the party and instead use taxpayer money to pay for these ads?
Well, I think it's absolutely vital. The British Columbians know what their government is doing. It's been a real honor and a privilege to serve for these first 100 days for British Columbians. And we've been focused on the priorities of British Columbians, which includes initiatives like driving down the cost of daily life, like today's announcement around BC ferry fares, providing predictable fares for businesses and people who are dependent on ferries. It's important to communicate to British Columbians, and we're going to continue to share with them the work that we're doing on their priorities, whether it's healthcare, around getting international doctors and nurses off the sidelines and into our hospitals, a new deal with the Doctors of BC to get family doctors for people who are searching for one, whether it's around public safety, responding to the mental health and addiction crisis in our streets people are seeing, or the issue of repeat violent offenders, working to keep them behind bars and pushing the federal government to address that issue as well. Whether it's the issue of housing, ensuring they have access to attainable, affordable housing, and protecting tenants in lower cost rental buildings from big corporations like real estate investment trusts that have been buying those buildings with a new fund. This is important work, and British Columbians need to know that the government is on their side.
Great. Next question goes to Rochelle Baker, National Observer.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Great. Thanks very much for taking my question. I was very interested to hear about electrification aspect. I'm looking to get more details about that. It's been part, electrification of the fleet's been part of the Clean BC plan for some time. Funding's been an issue. You've got 6 island-class vessels on the water that could eliminate 18,000 tons of emissions tomorrow if they could plug in. So I'm wondering how much of the $500 million will be dedicated to making sure that the boats will be able to plug in on shore, and by when?
Thanks. I'm going to turn this question over to the Minister, but let me note that there are 2 aspects to electrification of the fleet. One is predictable costs over the long run for British Columbians, and to get them out of the swings as the price of oil goes up and down. And the second is obviously our commitment around climate change. Today's announcement is about ensuring predictable fares as we do that work. And I'll pass it over to Rob Fleming to take on the technical aspects of your question.
Thank you very much, Premier. Yes, we're lucky to have 6 vessels that are hybrid electric in operation now, and there will be electrification initiatives going forward. Those hybrid ferries, though, that serve communities like Powell River and Port McNeill, Nanaimo, Campbell River, and the islands adjacent to them, are not actually using battery service for the majority of their operational purpose right now. What we need is shore power charging infrastructure, and BC Ferries had to make some capital adjustments during COVID, obviously, around their investments, but our government is interested in helping BC Ferries accelerate the electrification of the marine fleet that they administer. It's also a great story for British Columbia, quite frankly. So these island class vessels, the 6 of them, their main battery systems were developed by a company based in Richmond, BC called Corvus Energy. There are BC clean energy jobs attached to the electrification of our ferry fleet. For that reason, we're very interested in a federal partnership as well, because we think that the innovation that's happening in British Columbia will be good for every part of the marine sector throughout our country, and indeed for international sales.
Great. Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you. Rochelle, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. Sorry, that still doesn't answer my question around how much of a priority it is, how much will be dedicated to getting the shore power for these vessels, and by when?
So I don't have a breakdown. I mean, this announcement, this BC Ferries and the Commissioner to determine how we achieve ferry affordability. The Commissioner's job is to put price caps on fares. It is also to oversee the request on the operational cost increases and the capital plan of the Ferry Corporation. That's the capital side of BC Ferries operation is not the government of BC's job. It's an independent company, but the Commissioner has a very important role to play in overseeing the credibility and the importance of the investments that are planned to be made by BC Ferries. And that's exactly what's going on right now as they negotiate a new performance term.
Great, thank you. Our next question goes to Mary Brooke, Island Social Trends.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. The free passenger travel for seniors, Monday to Thursday, has been controversial in the past, and because seniors do have a wide range of income levels. So I'm just wondering, what's the current analysis of the financial impact of offering the free fares versus the social and political benefits that are obviously impacted in there?
Thanks. We are really proud that we brought back free sailings for seniors on select days so that they can, as you heard from Diana, see grandkids and visit friends and travel when they are in ferry-dependent communities. That's not going to change, and it's something that we celebrated when it was brought in because we know how important ferry access is for seniors in British Columbia. And I might invite Diana to come and speak about her experience in relation to that if she wishes.
Sure. It is, and yes, there are differences in people's income as seniors, but that is with everybody else as well. And so I know that it is very much valued by seniors to be able to travel. Sometimes that's the only way they are able to go and see their family and their grandkids and their friends. So it is really important, and it's definitely something that I use on a fairly regular basis because it gives me that opportunity to come in and do pro D days with my grandkids and do what I need to do. So it is really vital, and it's very much appreciated by a lot of ferry users. So thank you.
Great. Mary, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thanks. The job profile at BC Ferries right now, sorry, just going off speakerphone there. Are there any labor shortages, and is there any training going on now to recruit more workers on BC Ferries? Because there was a shortage of workers during the pandemic in particular.
Thanks. I might invite the Minister of Transportation to respond to this question.
Yes, I know that the BC Ferry Corporation has made a number of aggressive attempts to recruit the area of labor shortages. There have been labor shortages in a number of different job categories, including very senior positions that pilot our ships and also that are marine safety certified and work on the deck. So there have been efforts to recruit crewing. I don't have the specific numbers, but I know there have been job fairs throughout the province and beyond that have hired hundreds of workers to add to the BC Ferries workforce. There are also partnerships with important post-secondary institutions that do training for BC Ferries specific occupations. BCIT is one, Camosun College, Vancouver Island University. So I know they're pursuing and building on the partnership around training for marine certification positions.
Great. And that's a wrap.